call bank. He said you can call Bank of America the Bank of the Jesuits.
Oh, absolutely. And George, just a heads up, we're live now. But yeah, it's Aber Manhattan quoted that from the original source for that is Der Spiegel. Actually, no, I'll just bring that up here now that we're mentioning this, and maybe we can tie this into what we were just speaking about, George, about the reconstruction of San Francisco by Bank of America and the funding of Disney. But
Okay.
here I'm going to pull up the quote here from Der Spiegel because this was the original source. And in the book Church, Wealth, and Business Income by Martin Larson, there's also information or further analysis on this initial Der Spiegel report, which claims that the Jesuits are in control of Bank of America. But I'm just going to read because it's a really interesting quote that they use here, George, with Giannini. So it's just this will be 20 seconds or so. Quoting here, the influence of the Society of Jesus in the American financial world first became apparent 50 years ago when Italian financier A.P. Giannini founded the Bank of California, which today is one of the largest banks in the world under the new name of Bank of America. Giannini was an extremely skillful financier who owed his starting capital to the Jesuits and figured as their trust or straw man. Today, Bank of America is 51% owned by the order. That's the quote there, George. I'll link
I believe that statistic was from the 1950s, so you're talking over 60 years ago. And of course, was it 10, 12 years ago when you had that mini economic collapse, a bunch of banks disappeared, or other lending institutions such as Lehman Brothers, Washington Mutual Fund, and I know this is a different topic altogether, but something that Eric John Phelps mentioned is one of the reasons why Lehman was allowed to fail was it was a historically Jewish bank. It was a truly Jewish bank, not like Goldman Sachs.
Goldman Sachs, it has a Jewish name. Goldman Sachs is firmly controlled by the Jesuits. I mean, maybe we can get into that on the show. But if you look through who's on the executive committee and who's on the board, it's very clear the Jesuits are in control of Goldman.
Okay.
I think I heard Phelps mention this too. It's great information. This Bank of America was a key player. The Jesuits Bank of America was a key player in the recent 2008 recession because it was centered around because it was Bank of America which gobbled up Countrywide Financial, and the Countrywide Financial tanking along with Lehman Brothers is what's kind of spiraled the 2008 crisis. But Countrywide Financial was headed up by an individual called Angelo Mazzillo. And I'll search up his name here. Yeah, Angelo Mazzillo. I'll link his Wikipedia. But Angelo Mazzillo, who is in charge of Countrywide Financial, was educated by Jesuits at Fordham University. And actually, what was the Catholic Dodd, who is in charge of the Motion Picture Association, Christopher Dodd, I believe Jesuit trained also. Dodd was involved in the Countrywide Financial scandal as well. And then Bank of America came in and gobbled up Countrywide Financial for pennies on the dollar afterwards.
Well, before we get into a feature presentation, this is something I've been wanting to do on this forum for a while. Over the last year or so, we've made a number of references of the fourth vow of the Jesuits, also known as the extreme oath. But I know it might be a little bit time-consuming, and perhaps some people might say tedious. But do you mind if I actually read the quote in question? I'm not sure if you've done this before.
Oh yeah, definitely. And actually, let me pull up the while you're pulling that up, George, because I know Herbert C. Holdridge in his little pamphlet that he wrote it was a letter that he wrote to the President, Congress, and the Supreme Court. I just want to get he quotes the section of the congressional record where this oath comes from. I just want to read that. So this oath that you're about to read, George, so just for reference, people go to the congressional record, February 15th, 1913, page 3216. That's where I believe they reprint a fourth degree oath of the Knights of Columbus, but it's an identical oath to the extreme Jesuit oath of induction that you're about to read. I'll just repeat that so people can go to the congressional record, February 15th, 1913, page 3216. Yeah, definitely, George. Yeah, I think that'd be informative for people to hear the Jesuit oath if they haven't before.
Okay, there's some introductory material which I'm going to skip, which is not saying that it's not valuable, but well, actually, all right. As I said, this might seem a little bit time consuming, so I'll just give you the context. Elements of this goes back to the 16th century. It was modified a few times over the last almost 500 years. Um, this is based on an English translation from French in 1843. Okay, so the Jesuit Extreme Oath of Induction. The following is the Jesuit Extreme Oath of Induction given to high ranking Jesuits only. The oath is taken from the book The Subterranean Rome by Carlos Didier, translated from French and published in New York in 1843. It says, quote, when a Jesuit of a minor rank is elevated to command, he is conducted in the chapel of the convent of the order, where there are only 3 persons present. The principal or superior standing in front of the altar or on the side stands on a monk, one of whom holds a banner of yellow and white, which are the papal colors. And the other, a black banner and dagger and red cross above the skull and crossbones, which sounds like skull and bones, but that's besides the point. The words INRI and below the words Justum Necar Regis Impius. It's okay to kill an impious king, basically. Meaning which is it is just to eliminate impious or heretical kings, governments, or rulers. Upon the floor is a cross at which the postulate or candidate kneels. The superior hands him a small black crucifix, which he takes in his left hand and presses it to his heart. And the superior at the same time presents him with a dagger, which he grasps by the blade, and holds the point against his heart. The superior still holding it to the hilt and addresses the postulate. End quote. By the way, this sounds similar to a Masonic ceremony, but that's besides the point.
Well, George, just before you come back in, I'll link the post I found in a book by Jonathan Blanchard in 1888 called Scotch Rite Masonry, profusely illustrated. But he shows that the 32nd degree of Scottish Rite Masonry is literally the oath, or the motto of Scottish Rite Masonry's 32nd degree is the motto of the Jesuit order. Ad Margium Al Gloriam.
Okay, before I continue, you've mentioned this before in one of your recent videos, where 1913 was an important year in America for a couple reasons. It's when the 16th Amendment was allegedly ratified, and I say allegedly, and the Federal Reserve was created. That's significant for a couple reasons, because it's 13, and 19 plus 13 is 32. Now, I know that may sound like a stretch, but when you look at these events, you have to look at the numerics. Now, I'm not into numerology, but they are. That's part of their Kabbalah. There are certain numbers that keep coming up over and over again. Somebody shared this with me recently, that okay, I know this may sound like superstition, and it is. Okay, 13 is supposed to be bad. It's supposed to be unlucky. We just had Friday the 13th a few days ago, a few days ago, last Friday. Because that was the date, Friday, October 13th, was it 1312? The Knights Templar were officially abolished. Therefore, that superstition, Friday the 13th being bad or bad, having bad luck, that's what it allegedly started. Now, but as I said, I need to finish the oath because it's really time consuming.
Honestly, George, a lot of, maybe with like all the Freemasonic Jesuitical influence in the foundation of the American Republic, it's not a coincidence that there's 13 colonies like originally. And actually, I'm pretty sure with the Illuminati bloodlines, if you search up the like Borgia, Aldobrandini, Farnese, I believe there's 13 of them that come up.
Okay, so let me continue before we respond, because as I said, this is somewhat lengthy, but I think it'll be worth the wait. Superior, my son, heretofore you have been taught to act as a dissembler among the Roman Catholics, to be a Roman Catholic, and to be a spy even among your own brethren. Pause. Okay, this is George talking. So this is something we mentioned on the show before. People don't seem to realize that the Jesuits are much of a physical threat to fellow Catholics as they are to non-Catholics. They'll take their own people out with no qualms. They'll kill fellow Catholics, good, faithful Catholics in the eyes of the church, just because they happen to be in the way. They could be, quote, collateral damage, end quote. Or, but
Yeah, and just historical reference for people. This all you got. Well, this is in Theodore Greisinger's book, The History of the Jesuits. But there's the historical Jesuit Jainist rife in the church, where the Jainists, who were Catholics, who think they were Catholics who espoused the philosophies of Augustine, but the Jesuits actually viciously persecuted these Jainists just like they would like a Huguenot sect, in the 17th century, a Protestant Huguenot sect.
Okay, so I'm going to hold off on comments for now on because it would take 3 hours to read this thing.
I'll let you keep going through. No, it's just a great point. Like the history, shows undeniably that the Jesuits in the Vatican will kill Roman Catholics unhesitatingly. If it's so, friends.
Your own brethren, believe no man and trust no man. Among the reformers, to be a reformer. Among the Huguenots, to be a Huguenot. Among the Calvinists, to be a Calvinist. Among the Protestants, generally speaking, a Protestant. And obtaining their confidence, to seek even from their pulpits, to denounce with all vehemence your holy nature, our holy religion, and the Pope, and to even descend to so low as to among the Jews, as become a Jew among Jews, that you might be enabled to gather all information for the benefit of the order as his faithful soldier of the Pope. You have been taught to insidiously plant seeds of jealousy and hatred among communities, provinces, states that were at peace, to incite them to deeds of blood, involving them in war and each other, and to create revolutions and civil wars in countries that were independent and prosperous, cultivating the arts and sciences and enjoying the blessings of peace. To take sides with the combatants, to act secretly with your brother Jesuit who may be engaged on the other side, but to openly opposed to that which you might be connected, only that the church might be the gainer in the end, and the conditions fixed in the treaties for peace, that the ends justify the means. You have been taught your duty as a spy to gather all statistics, facts, and information in your power from every source, to ingratiate yourself in the confidence of the families of the circles of Protestants and heretics of every class and character, as well as that of the merchant, the banker, the lawyer among the schools and universities, and the parliaments and legislatures and judiciaries and councils of state, to be all things to all men, for the Pope's sake, for whose servants you are unto death. You have received all your instructions heretofore as a novice, a neophyte. You have served as a coadjutor, confessor, and priest, but you have not been invested with all that is necessary to command in the army of Loyola in the service of the Pope. You must serve the proper time as an instrument and executioner as directed by your superiors. For none can command here who has not concentrated his labors with the blood of the heretic. For, quote, without the shedding of blood, no man can be saved, end quote. Therefore, to fit yourself for the work and make yourself own salvation sure, you will, in addition to your former oath of the obedience to the order and allegiance to the Pope, repeat after me the oath of the Jesuits. This is where it actually begins. Quote, now in the presence of Almighty God, the Blessed Virgin Mary, the Blessed Michael, the Archangel, Blessed St. John the Baptist, and the Holy Apostles of St. Peter and Paul, and to all the sacred hosts of heaven, and to you, my ghostly Father, the Superior General of the Society of Jesus, founded by St. Ignatius Loyola and the pontificate of Paul III, continue to the present, due by the womb of the Virgin, the matrix of God, the rod of Jesus Christ, declare and swear that His Holiness the Pope's Christ Vicar Regent is the true and only head of the Catholic or Universal Church throughout the earth, and that by virtues of keys of binding and loosing giving to His Holiness my Savior Jesus Christ, He hath power to dispose all heretical kings, princes, states, and commonwealths and governments, all being illegal without sacred confirmation that may be safely destroyed. Therefore, To the utmost of my power, I shall and will defend the doctrines of the holiness, rites, and customs against all usurpers of heretical Protestant authorities uh, whatsoever, whether the Lutheran of Germany, Holland, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, and now the pretended authorities and churches in England and Scotland, and branches of the same now established in Ireland and the continents of America elsewhere, and all adherence to and regard that they be usurped and heretical, opposing the sacred Mother Church of Rome. I do renounce and disown any allegiance as due to any heretical king, prince, or state named the Protestants or liberals, or obedience to any laws and magistrates of officers. I do further declare that the doctrines of the churches of England and Scotland, the Calvinists, the Huguenots, and others, they of the name Protestant or liberal be damnable, and they themselves be damned, who will not forsake the same. I do further declare that I will assist and advise all or any of these holinesses agents in any place wherever it shall be sent, in Switzerland, Germany, Holland, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, England, Ireland, or America, or any kingdom or territory I shall come to. I do and will do to the uttermost to extirpate the heretical Protestant or liberal doctrines and to destroy all their pretended powers, regal or otherwise. I do further promise and declare that notwithstanding I am dispensed with and to assume my religion heretical for the propaganda of Mother Church's interest. I do keep secret and private all of her agents' counsels from time to time, as may entrust me not to divulge directly or indirectly by word, writing, or circumstances whatsoever, but to execute all that shall be proposed, given in your charge, or discovered unto me by you, my ghostly father, or any sacred covenant. I do further promise and declare that I will have no opinion or will of my own, or any mental reservation whatsoever, even as a corpse or cadaver, per de cabo, cadaver, but will unhesitatingly obey each and every command that I may receive from the superiors of the militia of the Pope and Jesus Christ. I will that I may go to any part of the world whatsoever may be, whithersoever I may be sent, to the frozen regions of the north, the burning sands of the deserts of Africa, the jungles of India, to the centers of civilizations in Europe, or to the wild haunts of the barbarous savages of America, without murmuring or repining, and I will be submissive to all things whatsoever communicated to me. I further promise and declare that I will, when opportunity present, make and wage relentless war, secretly or openly, against all heretics, Protestants, and liberals, as I am directed to do so, to extirpate with it and to exterminate them from the face of the whole earth. That I will spare neither age, sex, or condition, and that it will hang, waste, boil, flay, strangle, bury alive these infamous heretics, rip up the stomachs of their wombs of their women, and crush their infants' heads against the walls, in order to annihilate them forever, their execrable race. That I will, when I cannot do so openly, I will do so. I will secretly use the poison cup, the strangling cord, the steel of the poniard, or the leaden bullet, regardless of honor, rank, dignity, or authority of the person or persons, whatsoever there may be their condition in life, either public or private, as at any time may be directed to do so as any agent of the Pope or the superiors of the Brotherhood of the Holy Faith of the Society of Jesus. In confirmation, I hereby dedicate my life, my soul, and all my corporal powers, and with that dagger which I now receive, I will subscribe in my name written in my own blood in testimony thereof, and that should I prove false or weak in my determination, may my brother and fellow soldiers of the militia of the Pope cut off my hands and feet and my throat from ear to ear, my belly open and sulfur burnt therein, and with all the punishment can be inflicted upon me upon the earth, my soul and tortured by the demons of the eternal hell forever. All of which I swear by the blessed Trinity, blessed sacraments which I am now to receive, to perform on my part, to keep inviolable, and to call all the heavenly and glorious host of heavens to witness the Blessed Sacrament of the Eucharist. I will witness the same further my name written in the point this dagger dipped in my own blood, sealed in the face of the Holy Covenant. Okay, so there's some additional things where they're talking about. Okay, well, or superior. You will now rise to your feet, and I will instruct you in the catechism necessary to make your own to make yourself known as a member of the Society of Jesus belonging to this rank. In the first place, you as a brother Jesuit will, with any other mutually, sorry, with another mutually make this ordinary sign of the cross as any ordinary Catholic would. Then one crosses. Okay. So then he's talking about some things. This is from goes on to say the superior is talking to the candidate, the novice, and he says basically, if you say anything, I'll cut your throat. So I know that one's a bit long.
No, I believe this was in I believe you read this. Didn't? Oh, they take this oath with the dagger, pressed up right against their chest, like their heart. That this is a pretty intense black magic. Like it's hard to find a more extreme, volatile, disgusting oath that any body takes than this one. And this is why just with the occultist Helena Blavatsky claimed that the Jesuits are the biggest black magicians in the world. It's no coincidence when you see how these disgusting principles that you see how Heinrich Himmler modeled the Nazi SS strictly off of the Jesuit order. I'll even pull up that quote from Walter Schellenberg. I'll pull up both the quotes because Schellenberg also admits that Adolf Hitler modeled the Nazi Party off of the Jesuit order. It's no coincidence when you see these oaths that Felix Dzerzhinsky, the monstrous head of the Czechoslovak secret police, Dzerzhinsky sent hundreds of thousands to their deaths to the concentration camps and gulags. Dzerzhinsky aspired to be a Jesuit priest before becoming the head of the Czechoslovak secret police. The head of on the Allied side, I'm going to pull up this quote here because I don't know if you've seen the quote of this, George, straight from the source, but Marshal Ferdinand Foch actually credited the Jesuit fathers whose oath you just read. This is the Supreme Allied Commander of World War I. You can see on my screen here. This is from the National Catholic Welfare Conference News Bulletin of November 21st, 1921. It says the headline here, Foch says Jesuit fathers made his career a success. This guy was responsible for killing hundreds of thousands of his own French soldiers. Getting them chemically gassed, just sending them out like guinea pigs across no man's land to be slaughtered by German machine guns. And actually in Austro-Hungarian machine guns, and the German Kaiser during World War I, this bloodbath. And George, we saw from the oath that the Jesuits say that you can't have salvation without the shedding of blood. Kaiser Wilhelm, Kaiser, which is referred to as Caesar, Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany said that Pope Leo XIII told him that Germany was to become the sword of the Catholic Church during the First World War. But this is what the head of the Allied Command, Supreme Allied Command during World War I. This is the Supreme Allied Commander. He says here, any success I may have attained in life I owe to the Jesuit fathers at St. Clement's College. Same Jesuit fathers who adhere to the oath that George just read. St. Clement College, Metz, and the principles they taught me, God and country. So I'll link this source here, but I recommend everyone read this press bulletin. And now that I'm on the screen share, I'll show you the historical quote for Walter Schellenberg, admitting that Heinrich Himmler modeled the SS off the Jesuit order. This comes from Walter Schellenberg's book, Hitler's Secret Service, The Memoirs of Walter Schellenberg. Original title was The Labyrinth. Page 3132. Schellenberg says the SS organization had been built up by Himmler on the principles of the Order of the Jesuits. And George just read the principles of the Order of the Jesuits. The service, statues, and spiritual exercises prescribed by Ignatius Loyola formed a pattern which Himmler assiduously tried to copy. Absolute obedience was the supreme rule. Each and every order had to be accepted without question. And we saw that in the Jesuit oath. The Reichsfuhrer SS, Himmler's title as the supreme head of the SS, was intended to be the counterpart of the Jesuits' General of the Order, that being the Black Pope. And the whole structure of the leadership was adopted from these studies of the hierarchic order of the Catholic Church. Hierarchic order of the Catholic Church. This is really interesting here. A medieval castle near Paderborn in Westphalia was reconstructed and adapted to serve as a kind of SS monastery, the so-called Wabelsburg. Here, the secret chapter of the order assembled once a year. And actually, I have on my channel, I have the Satanist Michael Aquino, who founded the Temple of Set. I have a footage of him. I literally have footage of him admitting that he did a black magic ritual in Himmler's Catholic Wabelsburg, the SS monastery, Wabelsburg.
Well, I know Johnny has talked about. Well, Johnny has talked about.
I'm saying, just to your point, it's important to know the principles of the Jesuit oath, because some of the most vicious murderers in history have have modeled their own murder at bloody organizations off of the Jesuits.
Okay.
Right.
Well, I know
Himmler is the perfect example.
Okay, I know that Johnny has talked about Michael Aquino before, because among other things, he was stationed at Presidio, the now defunct Presidio, San Francisco, and Aquino was dear friends with LaVey, anti-LaVey. There are a number of pictures of Aquino at anti-LaVey's Church of Satan in San Francisco. Now, for what it's worth, anti-LaVey was of a mixed background. He was Catholic and Jewish. On his dad's side, he was Ukrainian Jew. He grew up in Chicago, so he moved from one Jesuitically controlled town, the Windy City, to San Francisco. And the Church of Satan actually opened on June the 6th, 1966, with LaVey, I guess, during the honors. Now, for what it's worth, during his ministry, if you can call it that, LaVey was a popular speaker at the University of San Francisco. I mean, people, it was, from what I heard, I never went, but what I heard, it was standing room only. People, I mean, Anton LaVey was basically a rock star back then. People just couldn't get enough of him.
Yeah, who was the I even saw, what was the Donahue TV host? What was the
Phil Donahue?
Yeah, I think he even had LaVey on his show.
Well, yes, of course. Phil Donahue, the good Irish Roman pro-abortion, pro-homosexual Roman Catholic, not to be confused with Bill Donahue, the supposedly conservative Catholic, William Donahue. Anyhow,
George, just to hammer, I think this wraps up your initial. Thanks for reading out the Jesuit oath for people to, if people haven't heard that before. But think about the Ustashi massacres that took place in Croatia. Does that not completely resonate with the barbarity of the Jesuit oath? In that case, you had the Jesuit-educated Cardinal Aloysius Stepniak as the primate of Croatia, and you had Jesuit-trained Ante Pavelic as the Führer of Croatia.
Well, not only what you mentioned Stefanik, we've talked about him before, and I'm not sure if we've mentioned this on the show, but Stefanik was a dear personal friend of Francis Joseph Cardinal Spellman. As a matter of fact, I mentioned this to you about a month or so ago, that there's actually an Archbishop Stefanik High School in New York. And as a matter of fact, it's been in existence since the 1950s.
Wow.
And,
absolutely, yeah. Spellman and the Knights of Columbus raised the funds for it, which is gross. But yeah, this is right around the same time. And you may have been intending to go into this, so I'll let you finish. But this is right around the time they were painting Stepniak as, he's been viciously persecuted by the godless communists of Yugoslavia. What a crusader for Christ! He's fighting for religious principles against the wicked, godless communists. That's kind of how they turned his disgusting war crimes into. And I'll link the book. All you got to do is read Edmund Paris's book, Genocide in Satellite Croatia. You can literally see photo after photo after photo of Stepniak blessing the Catholic Eustachies. You can see all the photos of Eustachi, like cutting off people's heads and stuff. All sorts of photos like that. There's also a photo of the Pope Pius XII received an entire Eustachi delegation at the Vatican.
Okay. And of course, this is according to our friend, the other Eric John Phelps, that for what it's worth, Pius XII, Eugenio Cardo Bocelli, his mistress was a German nun. So, and Bocelli had been, now granted, you're talking about Yugoslavia, but this goes to the point to where you're talking about a similar ethos. He was always Bocelli was very amenable, very warm to the Nazis.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, 100%. Yeah, he's Hitler's Pope. Actually, what was I forget the J.J. Murphy. I'll link his. I merged together his clerical fascism articles into one book. And his article, "How the Catholic Church Helped Hitler to Power," he quotes the British ambassador to Germany, who says that no man knew the Reich better than Bocelli. Bocelli had been stationed there, for like 15 years. Like he was already stationed in Germany way back to the Weimar Republic. He oversaw the entire he saw the ascension of the Center Party come to power, and then they dissolved the Center Party to allow Hitler to come into ranks. And it was Bocelli who signed the Concordat with the Nazis in 1933 when he was Secretary of State. He wasn't even Pope yet, and he was cozying up to the Nazis. And if people don't know, Hitler's vice chancellor, Franz von Papen, who was the chancellor of Germany before Hitler, Franz von Papen was a papal chamberlain and Knight of Malta.
Well, I think we've discussed before. You're talking about von Papen. Some people could say he was the de facto leader of Nazi Germany. Hitler was the front man, but it was von Papen who was calling the shots.
Oh, definitely, I would say so. I'd say so. Well, I think it's a combination. I think von Papen and Himmler, I actually think, yielded more power than Hitler, because they were more loyal to the church. And actually, it's really interesting. Like when this is what the movie Valkyrie is based off of. But one of the biggest assassination attempts against Hitler was concocted by the Catholic Church, because they wanted Hitler out and to put Himmler just as the open Führer. Because Hitler started to Hitler was he's admitted Catholic. It's in the Converted Catholic magazine, June 1944. There's a reprinted photo from the British Who's Who where Hitler openly proclaims that he's Catholic. But later in the Nazi regime, Hitler started to disregard the Concordat that Bocelli signed with the Nazis in 1933, which said that the Catholics had to have an absolute monopoly on education in Nazi Germany. Like, it gave tons of concessions to the church. Like, the Nazis were giving the Catholic Church all sorts of taxpayer dollars, for instance. So Hitler started to, they wanted to hit, so, but the guy who Count von Stauffenberg, who Tom Cruise in Orsini plays in the movie Valkyrie, is, he was a super Catholic in real life. Count von Stauffenberg. People aren't aware of that. There's actually information of that in Avram Manhattan's book, Catholic Imperialism and World Freedom. But they controlled it on all sides. And actually, this is a good point for, I'll pull up my screen share here. I just put this photo on my Reddit page. A New York Times article from 1946 literally said that the Allies, or the Nazis, were told by the Vatican of the Allied invasion plans. I'm going to put my screen share up here so people can see that. Here, this came from the New York Times, June 21st, 1946. The article headline here is, Abbott says Vatican gave tip on Africa. So you can just see, the Vatican was very, very involved with really all sides of the Second World War. Because, as we read in the Jesuit Oath, there's no salvation without the shedding of the blood of the heretics. And it was a huge bloodletting which took place in the First and Second World War. But you hear, so the headline is Abbott says Vatican gave tip on Africa. I'm quoting from it says wireless to the New York Times. Adolf Hitler was warned in August 1942 through sources originating in the Vatican of the Allies' North Africa plans, according to the evidence read before the examining magistrates today in the case of Otto Abetz, former Nazi diplomatic representative in France. The magistrate read before the High Court's examining commission letters discovered on Abetz's directions buried in the Black Forest. One of these addressed to Hitler, Abetz recalled that he had advised the Fuhrer as early as August 1942 of the Allied preparations for the invasion of North Africa, which he said had obtained from Vatican sources. So just like think of the implications of that. Like the Vatican is literally completely playing both sides against each other throughout the entire side of, or the entire duration of both First and Second World War. You know,
Well,
like,
if you think,
it's amazing that they can get away with this treason like this, and then you know, and then so like the Vatican is selling out the Allied army, while Dwight Eisenhower is saying in his book that his number one priority was to protect the Vatican. Like they're just they flip, you know.
okay, if you think about
And I'll just say, like, and it makes sense, I guess, because the Vatican is by definition an international organization. So in world conflicts, when international countries are involved, given that the Vatican transcends just a nation state, there's Catholics in every single country. There's going to be Vatican agents on both sides of every conflict. Kind of just thinking logically about how their super state is organized.
well, you know, this is something we've discussed before, but just to hit the point, Franklin Delano Roosevelt and Adolf Hitler were allegedly elected. Well, were elected in 1932. That's the military order of the Freemasons. They both assumed power the following year, 1933. So 1933 is the pinnacle number for the pinnacle Freemasonry. They both served 12 years. FDR died in 1945, and Hitler allegedly died in 1945. He left office.
Actually, for just George, it's funny. This Nazi Otto Abetz. I linked the article. Otto Abetz claimed that Hitler didn't die.
Yes. Well, as I said, allegedly died. Now, I'm not sure how. I think I mentioned this before. I'm not sure if Francisco Franco, was read in, but there's an article. I guess one of the Spanish newspapers after Hitler's alleged death. He basically said Adolf Hitler was one of the dear sons of the church, i.e., the Catholic Church.
Yeah, and that's quoted in I know Aver Manhattan quotes that in the Vatican and World Politics. If people want to check that out.
Okay, so anyhow, so he probably absconded into South America somewhere and died in the 1960s. But as far as the world was concerned, Adolf Hitler did die in May 1945 in the bunker with his Roman Catholic wife Eva Braun, so that's something people don't know, that yes, Eva Braun was a devout Roman Catholic. Most of the Nazi leadership was Catholic. Yes, you did have a few apostate Protestants like Hermann Goering, the head of the German Luftwaffe, the Air Force. But for most part,
I would say that the key Nazis were Catholic, like Mengele, the angel of death, Himmler, the head of the SS, Hitler himself, Karl Haushofer, Hitler's geopolitical advisor. Hitler's eugenicist was a Jesuit, Hermann Muckerman.
Yes.
And that's what I'll for the people to read. I'll link the J.J. Murphy articles I put together, because there's a good article in there called "How the Catholic Church Helped Hitler to Power." And I think it's not a coincidence that Nazism originated in Bavaria, the most Catholic part of Germany. And then also with France, George, this is another. This shows how Vatican loves totalitarian, authoritarian rule. In France during World War II, you had all Catholic leadership that betrayed France to the Nazis. General Weygand, Marshal Pétain, and Pierre Laval. All of them Jesuit-trained papal knights. And they
And of course,
openly betrayed France and allowed the Nazis to occupy France. And this was known as Vichy France.
well, yes, and of course, Charles de Gaulle's father, forgot his name, Gerard, I think, or Rene or something. He taught at a Jesuit university.
Oh, really? Actually, de Gaulle also, I believe, was de Gaulle. I think went to a Jesuit high school too.
Oh, okay. So
He basically became the dictator of France in 1958, and he pardoned all of the Catholic Nazi traitors and the traitorous Catholic clergy who sold out France to the Nazis. He pardoned all of them. He initially, de Gaulle, suckered the French people into saying that I'm going to go after the traitorous Catholic clergy who helped sell out our country to the Nazis. But de Gaulle, being a Jesuit-trained Catholic, predictably, it was just all doublespeak, I guess, at the end of the day. And then, like, he signed, like, he basically, like, he drafted the modern French Constitution, I know, in 1958. That was pretty cool. And, like, the French president has basically identical emergency power status as the American president. He can basically suspend the Constitution whenever he wants. We can thank Jesuit-trained de Gaulle for that.
Well, thanks, Charlie. But anyhow, it's interesting. Both de Gaulle and Eisenhower died in 1969, the year I was born. So I realized, you had to die some year. But that's interesting, as I say, two the most seminal figures of World War II died in the same year. I presume that they both died of natural causes, but who knows? Now, speaking of which, I mentioned this on our when I was doing the show yesterday with your namesake. You're talking about how de Gaulle basically pardoned all these criminals like Pétain, these Nazi war criminals who basically turned France into a proxy state for Nazi Germany. Well, I was talking when I was doing the show yesterday with your namesake. We were talking about the Battle of the Bulge, which was officially known as the German counteroffensive in the Ardennes forests in Belgium, Luxembourg, and France. That took place in December 1944, January 1945. The operation began on yesterday's date, December the 16th, 1944, 75 years ago. Well, there were several massacres that took place during the Battle of the Bulge, the most famous one of which was Malmedy. Now, there's dispute as to how many people died, but the Waffen-SS, the Nazi soldiers, they shot at minimum dozens of American soldiers, perhaps hundreds. The number is in dispute. And the following year, there's a trial at Dachau, which had been a concentration camp. The Dachau trials aren't nearly as well known as the later Nuremberg trials, but all the architects are tried and most of them were convicted. Dozens of them were sentenced to be hanged, and others were supposed to get lengthy prison sentences. However, Eisenhower's deputy, Lucius Clay, who had actually become, I guess, the military governor of occupied Germany from 47 to 49, basically vacated all the decisions or commuted them all. Now, Lucius Clay Sr. lived from 1898 to 1978, to give you some context. So, as I said, he was Eisenhower's deputy. That should be a red flag. And he was the governor, he was like the Lord. He was basically the king of Germany, if you will, for all intents and purposes.
So he was working with McCloy while he was the Allied High Commissioner.
Well, McCloy replaced him.
Okay, McCloy replaced him. Okay. Just because why you brought this up is that I've heard you. I heard. I think this was 2 shows you did with Phelps. McCloy came up in this. If you're not aware of this quote, George, you might find it interesting. This came from a New York Times article in 1975 called "Head of Study on Gulf Oil Funds." But McCloy was quoted as saying, "I have a sort of Catholic attitude, a lowercase c," end quote, and then quote, "or else my Scotch Presbyterian forefathers will stir in their graves." And then McCloy also said in a separate Times article that I had the powers of a dictator as High Commissioner of Allied Forces in West Germany, but I think I was a benevolent dictator.
Okay. So You're talking about,
I see it's the same relationship with the Clay individual you're bringing up too. I'm sure McCoy and him are very close, and they were working in the IG Farben office. If people aren't aware, that was the headquarters.
No, Lucius Clay Sr. was Episcopalian, which, as I've mentioned before, is the American version of the Anglican Church. However, his wife was Roman Catholic. As a matter of fact, his wife had to get dispensation or special permission of the Catholic Church in order to marry Lucius. Now, for what it's worth, there are several interesting factoids about Lucius Clay. If you look at his awards and honors, he received an Order of the British Empire, which is purely honorary because you cannot. So he was not, since he was a U.S. citizen, he was not known as Sir Lucius. He was a member of the Military Order of the White Lion. Now, I had never heard of this before, but this is, I believe, from Czechoslovakia. Yes. And he is also a member of the Order of Kutuzov, which is a Russian order. So, as I said, he was not technically speaking a papal knight, but essentially he was. Also, he was on the cover of Time magazine in 1948.
Oh, that's a sign. I found the people who make it to the cover of Time magazine are usually papal agents. And they threw a bunch of Catholic Nazis on the Time magazine cover, for instance. Hitler was given Man of the Year by Time.
Well, speaking of which, the girl from Sweden, Greta Thunberg, she's the person of the world, or what are they calling it? She is the person of the year this year.
Oh, sorry, George. I was distracted there. Who is the person of the year this year?
Greta Thunberg, the little girl.
Oh, Thunberg. Oh, okay. Actually, that makes perfect sense. Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, because she was also given some Catholic missionary order called her the Virgin Mary this year. Also, they compared Greta Thunberg to the Virgin Mary. And I have the video on my channel. She went to speak with Jesuit Pope Francis, and her school strike was on May 24th, the exact same day that Francis's encyclical Laudato Si came out, or Laudato Si. So it's very covert. And think of this Jesuit doublespeak. And I have a question from the chat, George, that about the business plot that I'd like to address here. But just think about Greta Thunberg. Like you said, she's on the cover of Time magazine. She's given a speech at the United Nations. The Pope appears to be all about saving, quote unquote, saving the planet, and with his new green order. While this is going on, though, the Jesuits are still accepting money from oil companies. Like, I have this sourced in the post. I'll link the post I did where this is sourced. Spring Hill College has got thousands and thousands of dollars from I think it was like a $30,000 donation from Exxon. And there's a Jesuit quoted saying that, "Oh, we're so proud of this donation and gift from ExxonMobil." But if you think about the incredible doublespeak, like they're condemning oil, they're literally shunning oil companies and shunning coal, the entire it's dirty, we need to save the planet, blah 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 blah. You should feel bad if you go on a vacation because you're contributing to the carbon footprint. Oh, you shouldn't drive anywhere because that's bad for the environment, blah 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 blah. While they're pushing all this rhetoric, they're accepting money from oil companies, which is kind of incredible. And a Jesuit trained John Barrasso at Georgetown, George. He's the head of one of the I think the environmental committee, the Congressional Environmental Committee. And he's on board with gutting the EPA completely. John Barrasso wanted the current head of the EPA is a coal lobbyist, Andrew Wheeler, and Jesuit trained John Barrasso was crusading for him to be in his current position. So they control both sides completely. They control the extreme deregulation side of the environment, and they control the extreme climate change wing as well. But the question was there, do you have anything to add on that?
Well, something you mentioned a few months ago is going back in the 20th century, they were, at least in the United States, they were very much in front. They worked both sides of the whole labor issue. They were pro-union and anti-union. They were for. I mean,
Well,
most.
you think of this with Coughlin, George. Coughlin was famous, a Catholic priest, Charles Coughlin, who openly was preaching that democracy will end in America, and we need to ally ourselves with the Catholic Nazis and Catholic fascist Franco regime. But he was Father Charles Coughlin was famously for and against the New Deal, which confused millions of people. He was doing his Jesuitical doublespeak. But sometimes he would rail, he would call it the Jew New Deal, then all of a sudden he's praising Roosevelt and the New Deal, kind of Jesuitical tactics.
Well, you could talk about Ronald Reagan as a young man. He was very much of a leftist. He was pro-union, pro-FDR, but I guess in the 1960s he allegedly saw the light and saw the errors of his way in Egypt. And
actually, George Reagan was president. His union, the head of the AFL-CIO when Reagan was president, was Jesuit trained at Georgetown, Lane Kirkland, and it was Reagan though who famously fired the air traffic controllers when they went on strike, I think in 1981, and that's actually symbolically the destruction of unions in the United States. And the current union leadership is all Catholic. Richard Trumka is the head of the AFL-CIO now. He's a super Catholic. He says he models his union policy from the Pope. But that's actually a really interesting study. If people look at the previous union leadership, the Catholics have been in complete control of the unions in the United States since 1930. Even before the Knights of Christ, I think the Knights of Labor, I think was the initial big union in the States, and that was predominantly Catholic leadership. They've owned the entire union apparatus in the United States, and then the current one, Richard Trumka, is a devout Catholic. I think the union head before him, John Sweeney, you can find there's many articles he openly said Catholic social teaching is what credited him for his union leadership, and these guys are far left. And think about this: Ronald Reagan, who's quote unquote far right, also said that Catholic social teaching and the encyclicals from Pope Leo XIII inspired his social policies and economic policies. And Reagan said that, I had that video on my channel, he said that in an address to the Knights of Columbus in 1982 at their centennial convention.
Okay, so you said that video is from 1982.
Yes. I think he says this. Reagan's speaking in Connecticut, at the Knights of Columbus headquarters, where he admits that Pope Leo XIII's encyclicals are a model for his economic policies. And that just shows it perfectly because both far left and quote unquote far left and far right political figures are citing papal encyclicals as their inspiration.
Well, if we can just talk about something we were discussing about an hour ago, is we're talking about, even though it doesn't actually say this in the oath, but one of the things that it advocates is the Hegelian dialectic, i.e. working both sides of the fence. And a good example of this is what's been going on last month or so in the U.S. Congress when you're talking about impeachment for Donald Trump. This is something that I know we've discussed a couple of times recently, is look at how many puppets on both sides are pro-Trump and how many puppets on both, and are anti-Trump. I mean,
they're not really anti-Trump though, George, because I think the Democrats just approved his military budget increased up $30 billion. Oh, pardon there. Dropped something there. Yeah, but the Democrats literally approved his military budget of $30 billion. $30 billion. So, and it's kind of incredible. They call him a dictator. They call him a servant of Russia. Why would you give a dictator $30 billion more in military spending? We mentioned, so yeah, they just approved his military budget, and the Democrats actually were the ones to push the Patriot Act extension through to continue the police state in America. And the Patriot Act was drafted by a Jesuit professor, Viet Dinh.
Yeah, and it was implemented. Now it was Viet Dinh who wrote the legislation at Georgetown. However, it was James Jim Sensenbrenner, a representative from Wisconsin, who helped actually implement it. He actually wrote the draft, the legislation for it to be introduced into Congress. Now, Sensenbrenner grew up Methodist, but he's now a Roman Catholic. So
that reminds me of Paul Bremer, George. Paul Bremer was the head of right before right after the U.S. invaded the it was basically like an occupied state for the first year or so. What was the Supreme Allied Council? I think was the title. But Paul Bremer was like the interim president of Iraq, and Paul Bremer converted to Catholicism before he went into this role.
Oh, well, good for him.
Similar to this the Patriot Act connection you just mentioned. And just George, another. Would you classify the business plot as a Hegelian dialectic plot here? I think I will, because while I'm going to share my screen here, I'm going to pull up a photo of Roosevelt with the president of the Jesuits, Robert Ignatius Gannon. And this Robert Ignatius Gannon was Cardinal Spellman's handler. Spellman went to Fordham. Gannon was the president of Fordham. This Robert Gannon was a Jesuit of power. He said that the FBI and Fordham have the same ideas. That comes from Steve Rossum's book, The FBI and the Catholic Church. But you can see Roosevelt here is literally laughing it up with the Jesuit Father Robert Ignatius Gannon. This is October 28th, 1940. This is this is 6 years after the supposed business plot. And I'm at the opinion now that I think the business plot could have been a very diabolical Hegelian dialectic to actually get the American people to rail behind Roosevelt and get behind all the New Deal reforms. And basically, Roosevelt actually did turn America into a communist state officially. For the Social Security programs, he actually put America into a permanent state of national emergency. He turned America into a military government as well. He made it he signed also 6,000 executive orders. Roosevelt signed. He famously they were kind of propping him up as a messiah figure too at the same time, because maybe he said that all we have to fear is fear itself, and he said I'm going to drive the money changers out of the temple. He's quoting the Bible, almost the implications that he's coming as a savior here. But what the New Deal, all the New Deal did was get the government actually subsidizing the established monopolies in business. That's all it did. Roosevelt created the Export-Import Bank on an executive order, and the Export-Import Bank is literally just a massive fund for corporate welfare, giving free money out to Lockheed, free money out to Raytheon, free money to McKesson. Lockheed Martin gets $50 billion a year from total from the Export-Import Bank and other various taxpayer subsidies. But Roosevelt wasn't a revolutionary at all. So I just wonder if part of the business plot was to prop him up as a legitimate, savior for the people. Just because no one got arrested, all the implications, because Alfred E. Smith was implicated with the Liberty League, Knight of Malta, John Jacob Raskob, the chairman of DuPont, was implicated. He was the president of the Knights of Malta, and so these papal knights, I think, like Raskob and Al Smith, would have been read in enough to know that this is ultimately a ruse, that this whole business plot, because no one was prosecuted. Now to the I do believe Smedley Butler's testimony was censored at the McCormick-Dickstein committee, and actually, George, the business plot was the first event. This actually created the House of Un-American Activities, which was essentially just a fifth column for Catholic Action. If people aren't aware.
Okay.
Dominated the House of Un-American Activities. Actually, the longtime chairman, I think it was Francis Walter, the longtime chairman of the House of Un-American Activities, Francis E. Walter. I believe he went to Fordham, Georgetown, actually. Yeah, so I know it's interesting. So the Smedley Butler, it was through this Butler trial that the House of Un-American Activities, became created, which became completely a Catholic fifth column. What do you think of the business plot being a Hegelian dialectic versus it being an actual genuine plot to turn America into a fascist dictatorship?
Well, you see, it reminds me of what's been going on basically during the entire Trump administration. There have been several different chapters in this whole plot, if you will. You had Russian collusion, uh, you have the Robert Mueller testimony, the Mueller report, uh, you have Ukraine collusion and things like that, and Donald Trump trying to get dirt on Joe Biden and his son Hunter from the Ukrainian president Vladimir or whatever Zelensky, who's actually, by the way, Zelensky is actually that is how, I mean, he's not very well known here in the West, but that is what he did before he was a politician. And it also helps if he's of a Jewish background, so that creates all sorts of fury there. And when this is said and done, Donald Trump is almost certainly going to be elected by a landslide. I'm going to reckon at least 60%. He's going to get at least 60% of the popular vote.
Well, I think they're gonna make Joe Biden the candidate to go against him to ensure, I think, that Trump wins. Jesuit Joe Biden.
Oh, okay. Well, it doesn't matter whom they send against him, but
because I don't know if you saw it, George. Trump actually made a threat this week that he wouldn't participate in the debates. Because I'm not a supporter of Bernie Sanders, but if there's one guy that Trump would not want to debate, it would be Bernie Sanders. Just because Bernie Sanders would call him out just on all like the corporate stuff, like how Trump surrounded himself with billionaires. Like he's increased the military spending by like $100 billion, and then he's saying, "I want to cut your Medicare at the same time." Like all the lobbyists, all the lobbyists that Trump has surrounded himself with. Like the current Secretary of Defense is a Raytheon lobbyist, Mark Esper, who actually just there's in the news this week. There's some Saudis shot. They actually killed, I think, 3 Americans at a military base in Pensacola, Florida. And Mark Esper was like, "Oh no, we can't rush the judgment here. The Saudis are good people." It's because Raytheon selling billions and billions of dollars of weapons to Saudi Arabia. But the point being that like Bernie is the only person that would actually challenge Trump on the corporate swamp that he's surrounded himself with. Trump has personally enriched himself. Like a lot of the Pentagon, like there's been reports out like the Pentagon stays at Trump hotels when they're abroad now. Like Saudi Arabia is funding the Trump hotel empire. I just can't see anyone else besides Bernie Sanders, bringing this up in the debate. Because like Elizabeth Warren voted for Trump's increased military budget. It was like they're $40 billion. So I just ultimately I think Joe Biden is going to be the candidate because of how connected he is to the Catholic Church in the system. And it's just like Hillary. Like Trump didn't win because he was such a great candidate. He won because Hillary was a horrible candidate. It's like Joe Biden's a horrible candidate. And that's what will catapult Trump into the presidency.
But you see, the thing is with Bernie Sanders is that he has compromised himself. I mean, he's like,
very much so. As I'm saying, like Bernie's super compromised. He's essentially like a communist. Like he praises the Soviet Union, praises communist China. He's gone to the Vatican multiple before. So he I'm not in any way endorsing him. I think Bernie would be the only one to actually challenge Trump in a debate setting.
Well, I think you probably have a better shot of becoming Prime Minister of Canada.
Oh, definitely. Well, Trudeau would probably happily appoint him into his cabinet if things don't work out. You work out a dual citizenship.
Oh, okay. So, anyhow, and of course, Sanders' current wife is Roman Catholic.
Oh yeah, there you go. So ultimately, actually, I think Sanders' job is to I just noticed during the Hillary Clinton campaign, he never once challenged Hillary Clinton. He's very very soft. I think that's by design. He's designed to just roll over.
Well, of course.
A lot of people don't realize. Like, yeah, this was Catholic. This was Catholic Antonin Scalia, and like the case Bush versus Gore. It was actually determined that like American or United States citizens have like no say in who gets elected. Because a lot of people don't know, like George Bush was like installed as president by like the five Catholic Supreme Court Supreme Court. And, like the Supreme Court that's modeled off of a Roman temple building, also that's admitted on their own official government website. Yeah, Bush was appointed as president by the court. In the case Bush versus Gore, it was Catholic Opus Dei Jesuit trained Antonin Scalia who wrote the decision. But he actually says that like United States citizens don't have like the say in who gets elected. It's the Electoral College that determines it. It's not the electorate.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, I know I mentioned this before, but are you talking about the late Antonin Scalia, who was dear personal friends with Ruth Bader Ginsburg?
Yes, Antonin Scalia. And just for people, and just to debunk, maybe we could do this too, George. We could debunk the idea that the Jews control the Supreme Court. Ginsburg, she's the only current. I guess there's two, her and Stephen Breyer. But Ginsburg's late husband was a professor at Jesuit Georgetown University.
Yes.
Martin Ginsburg?
Yes, he died back in 2010.
And you found on the other Jewish judge on the Supreme Court, Stephen Breyer, that he was given the Stein Award by Jesuit Fordham University.
Yes.
So I think that should the two big bad Jewish justices that are controlling the so-called Supreme Court. There's only two of them, and both of them have direct connections to the Jesuits. And how many Catholics are on the Supreme Court? There's 6 openly. I think Time Magazine even did an article on Catholics in the Supreme Court. Brett Kavanaugh is a devout Catholic. Clarence Thomas is a devout Catholic. The Chief Justice, John Roberts, is a Knight of Malta, a devout Catholic. Let me pull this up.
And of course,
George, from CNN.com. Literally from CNN.com. You could call CNN the Catholic news agency. Their headline from 2018. Let's just pull it up. Why do Catholics hold a strong majority on the Supreme Court? Question mark. There you go. That proves that the Jews do not control the Supreme Court. You know.
Well, of course.
I'll link that article. I just see. I don't know if you've seen it. I see tons of disinformation out there that they call it the Supreme Court, and it's somehow a Jewish plot when it's literally a Roman temple that the Supreme Court building is. It's a Roman temple, literally, like the architecture, and like six of the judges are Catholic. Oh, there you go. Okay, sorry, the CNN article started playing like a video in the background there. But the 6 judges are Catholic. The one Protestant justice, quote unquote Protestant justice, Neil Garouche, went to a Jesuit prep school, Georgetown Prep. So he might as well say 7 Catholics on the Supreme Court.
Well, and of course, you have you had a stretch of something like 6 or 7 years, with 2010 to 2017, where you did not even have one punitive Protestant on the Supreme Court, which is the first time that has ever happened. As a matter of fact, Michael Voris on the Vortex did a video on this back in 2010, in which he was celebrating the death of Protestantism in America. And he said this, 9 years ago. He said, Protestantism is now officially dead in America, because the first time in our history, in over 200 years, there is not at least one punitive Protestant on the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court is simply a reflection of what is going on in the country.
Now, it's an unelected branch of government, so it's fitting that Catholic concentration concentrates in institutions that have nothing to do with democracy, or voters' choice. And that's why we see so many Catholics as in the CIA, for instance. CIA directors are not elected. FBI directors, FBI aren't elected. Homeland Security aren't elected. And I just see a point here. It's a good point. Bernie Sanders. I want to make it clear. I wasn't endorsing Bernie Sanders at all. I was just pointing out that he would be the only one to take Trump on with his corporate connections. But Bernie Sanders also, has corporate connections. Bernie Sanders is like a multimillionaire. I think he has like 4 different properties. Has a tax exempt foundation. So ultimately, a lot of what he's doing is Jesuitical doublespeak and hypocrisy. And you can see a video I know on the internet of Sanders speaking about how he was inspired by Jesuits in South America. Kind of similar to how Chomsky was inspired by Jesuits in South America, but Chomsky actually lived with Jesuits in South America. I don't think Sanders lived with the Jesuits, but he may have.
And of course, one of the boogeymen of the past was Saul Alinsky, who allegedly in the early 1970s wrote the rules for radicals. He was mentored by Tom Godet. I mentioned that before. Godet, I don't recall his dates off the top of my head. He went to Boston College because he's from Boston originally, and grew up, devout Roman Catholic, and moved to Chicago, and where he basically created a community, the whole community organizer movement in the 1960s. His proteges was Alinsky. In the early 1970s, Alinsky allegedly wrote the rules for radicals, in which is basically a tutorial on how to be obnoxious. So one of the tenets of this little booklet is, there are several tenets, but one of them, which is famous, is always accuse your opponent of something which you're guilty yourself, and keep repeating the accusation. And it doesn't. So the bottom line is, don't let facts get in the way of your argument.
Well, think about this. The whole Ukraine thing is that to a T. Like Jesuit Joe Biden has literally admitted on camera to bribing or getting the Ukrainian prosecutor fired over them looking into his Jesuit-educated son, Hunter Biden, being on a board of a natural gas company when he has no experience in the natural gas business. Like Joe Biden's literally on foot. Like I think we mentioned, it's many people have showed this. Like it's even on Mark Dice's channel. I think you mentioned Joe Biden admits to the guilt of what they're accusing Trump of doing, and it just like no one's talking about it in the media. Like on on the Democratic machine side. And and the Democrats have openly admitted that they view Saul Alinsky as like their mentor. Like I'm pretty sure didn't Hillary even write like her master's thesis on Saul Alinsky?
I believe so. It was
And like you said, Tom Godet, it's spelled Gaudette. Jesuit trained Tom Godet was an associate of Saul Alinsky, and Saul Alinsky was also very close to the Catholic hierarchy in Chicago. I even seen like Michael Voris do detailed exposés on that. But Saul Alinsky was very, very close with the Catholic bishops in Chicago. Like they showed him around. Like he basically became. Actually, let me see. There's this quote here from Catholic World Report. Let me just see. I'll get the exact quote here. Let's see here. I just pulled up this article here, but there's a quote. It looks like it says Saul Alinsky drew his power from the Catholic Church. Okay, to understand the origins of the CCHD, one also has to understand the Catholic origins of Saul Alinsky's rules for radicals. The Catholic origins of Alinsky's rules for radicals. From his earliest days of community organizing in the 30s, Saul Alinsky drew from the organizing power of the Chicago's Catholic churches. According to Alinsky's biographer, Sanford Horwitz, Alinsky became friends with the priests who were assigned to Chicago's, quote, back of the yards churches. Located in the area of the old stockyards, they were the poorest parishes in the city, and Alinsky was determined to organize the workers there. The young priests welcomed Alinsky's help, and as many of them saw links between their theological tradition and Alinsky's organizing goals. Horwitz points out that Pope Leo XIII's 1891 encyclical Revum Novarum provided the guiding force in organizing stockyard workers. So I'll link that source there. But so that shows that Alinsky had a very deep relationship with the Catholic hierarchy in Chicago, and that's where he came up. And Chicago has been established as like maybe the most Catholic city in America. You know, it was Catholic Archbishop James Edward Quigley who said the Catholic Church will rule the world when the United States rules the world. But do you have anything to? I probably have to get going here, George, in about 20 minutes or so. Just a heads up. Do you have anything else you wanted to, or do you have anything else to comment on Solinsky or anything else?
Well,
To bring up? I'll let after you go in here. I wanted to mention that I linked this in my community page, but your namesake, George W. Elderkin, wrote a great book in 1954 called The Roman Catholic Problem. And I recommend people check that out. But I wanted to read just the little section because this is the only book I've seen published where the relief portraits of the inquisitorial popes Innocent III and Gregory IX is exposed in print. And it's a really good book. I recommend. George, I'll send you the email of the link to archive.org. But
Okay.
and I don't know if you and just really interesting too. Just people aren't aware. Just I thought this was crazy how Alexander VI is on the Columbus doors at the Congress. But yeah, you jump in there, George, if you have anything to add. I'll mute my mic.
I don't have anything to add to Solinsky. Alinsky. However, you could say he's like almost like the 20th century version of Karl Marx.
Yeah, actually, Marx also, Alinsky came up in a very Catholic environment in Chicago. Marx came up in the most Catholic province of Germany, Trier, educated at a Jesuit high school.
Oh, okay. So
yeah, there's definitely fundamental similarities between the two, and they were both used as like Jewish, like scapegoat frontmen, to hide behind. To point, oh look, here's the big bad Jewish boogeyman. When you look behind these two guys, you see that they're just Jesuit puppets.
Well, somebody just sent me something last week. Speaking of Marx, well, this is actually he died. Was it 1882, 1883, something like that. So over 130 years ago, 140 years ago, or whatever it was. Somebody sent me something last week. That several prominent figures of the 20th century were in Vienna at the same time, 1912, 1913. Adolf Hitler, he grew up there. That's no big deal. Joseph Zhukashvili, aka Joseph Stalin. Albert Einstein and Sigmund Freud at the same time, and they all interacted with each other at the same time. So Adolf Hitler, the future leader of Nazi Germany, Joseph Stalin, the future leader of communist Russia, Sigmund Freud, the father of psychiatry, and Albert Einstein, who is considered to be the father, I guess, the father of relativity, if you will.
Well, that's a very interesting meeting that they're all meeting there. Vienna is a very Catholic Austria. I was saying all of those guys too. I think if you look into all of their backgrounds, you can see the Jesuits connecting all three of them together. Actually, I'm pretty sure Veritas Aquitas I saw did a post on Freud connecting him to the Jesuits recently. It's interesting. Yeah, it says his post was psychoanalysis of Sigmund Freud originated in Christian aesthetics, and he actually quotes Bertrand Russell, the book The Scientific Outlook, page 179, for the Jesuits being the precursors for Freudian psychoanalysis. I'll link he has an image of that quotation here, and it's an open fact. Like Carl Jung taught or lectured at Jesuit Fordham University. And the guy, one of the names you mentioned, Stalin, was openly, educated by Jesuits, and at the Tiflis Seminary in Georgia. And Albert Einstein had a Jesuit-educated priest, Father George Lemaitre, as his mentor on matters related to science, in particular the Big Bang Theory. So
okay.
I'm gonna say, so if you look in the background of all these figures you met in Vienna that you mentioned, the Jesuits come up in all the backgrounds.
Well, and of course, you have something we mentioned in the broadcast last week. Theodor Herzl, who's considered to be the father of Zionism, got his degree from University of Vienna. And something we also discussed last week, or whenever we did the last show, was it 1903, 1902? He met with was it Pius X to get his blessing for the creation of the future country of Israel.
Yes, and actually, George, I found another. I found that the Jesuit Joseph Rettinger was close with one of the founders of the Zionist movement, Nahum Zakalov. But Zakalov also he went to see the Pope on numerous occasions, beginning in 1915, to get support for the Zionist state. And that's even on Nahum Zakalov's Wikipedia page. That he went to get the Pope's blessing for the creation of Israel.
Okay, so you had to be going fairly soon. I realize that. So I just want to hit on a couple of things, if I could, not to shift gears. But I was looking something up about what it was for, and I came across some interesting names whom I've never heard of. So yes, I know that's an odd segue. I came across the name Frank J. Hogan, who have you ever talked about him in any of your videos?
Oh, was he Ed Dohany's lawyer?
Yes.
Okay, actually, yes. So he got Doheny off of the Teapot Dome scandal, and there's a big law firm named after him today in Washington. And actually,
of course,
I'll link the post I did on Doheny. I quoted a little text from. Actually, let me pull that up here. Yeah, because Hogan actually had a celebration with Doheny after he got him off the Teapot Dome scandal, and it was a celebration with the Catholic clergy present. I just want to pull this up. It's a really interesting. Frank J. Hogan, and okay, it was okay. So this was the quote comes from Dark Side of Fortune: Triumph and Scandal in the Life of Oil Tycoon Edward L. Doheny. I'll link the post. But just Hogan was celebrating with the Catholic bishops after this decision. It's an interesting quote. Right, so do you have anything? Were you gonna keep going into Hogan there, George? I just wanted to get the background information with that meeting.
Okay, so
Dome.
Okay, so to give you the context of Frank Joseph Hogan, he lived from 1877 to 1944. He got his law degree from Georgetown University. In addition to the whole Teapot Dome scandal, which you mentioned, he was the president of the American Bar Association in the late 1930s. Now, if we get 1938, 1939. Now, to me, I'm not saying that's necessarily a conflict of interest, but that smacks of impropriety. You had this, I guess, probably high-priced ambulance chaser who's in charge of the highest legal body in America. And also, I'm just looking up Hogan in his Wikipedia page. As I said, he was also friends. Hogan was also friends with Andrew Mellon.
Oh yeah, he was Secretary of the Treasury at one point.
Yes, and he was also Hogan was personal friends with Charles Coughlin.
Oh wow, the fascist Catholic priest who was preaching that the end of freedom and democracy in America.
Yes. Now, and of course, I think John Phelps must have edited his page because get this, he, as I said, Hogan got his undergraduate or got his law degree from Georgetown. As I said, he got an LLD from Lavelle University, which is Well, it's secular, but it's up in up in Quebec. But he also received an honorary degree from Manhattan College in New York City, and he was a member of the Holy Sepulchre.
Well, as was Ed Doheny was also a knight of the Holy Sepulchre. And just I had the photo up here. I don't know if you see it. Just this is the photo of Frank Hogan with Ed Doheny right after both papal knights. One papal knight got the other papal knight acquitted for corruption. It's been working like that for almost like 100 years now. 1920s. An American, and actually this goes into those busts of the popes, George. They say that the inquisitorial popes are the foundations of American law. So this is probably, and I personally think Cardinal Spellman was behind putting these in the Congress because they went in 1950. But that's probably why we see papal knights like Doheny getting off, in the Teapot Dome scandal. He's a, loyal servant of the church.
Yeah. So, well, the American Bar Association came into being in 1878. So you're talking 140 some odd years ago. And it's a voluntary association. So you don't have to be part of it. But unless you're part of it, if you want to practice law in America, your chances of being hired anywhere are almost impossible. So you could say it's an involuntary and voluntary association. And so I'll have to look more into the ABA and its history and that sort of stuff. And I'm sure Rome, just having a gut feel, since Hogan was in charge of it back in the 1930s, I'm sure Rome was responsible for its creation.
Oh, most definitely so. No, that's something to further look into. Yeah, because I'm going to try to actually see it. Like, it'd be worthwhile to find like a biography that was written on this guy. I'm sure there's lots of information on how close he was to the bishops and works like that. Yeah, I think the source did. Oh, I muted my mic there accidentally. This came from the book "Dark Side of Fortune: Triumph and Scandal in the Life of Oil Tycoon Edward Doheny." But it says high-ranking officials in the Catholic Church were at the banquet to celebrate Papal Knight of the Holy Sepulchre, Doheny getting off for the Teapot Dome scandal. I think that's very intriguing. And another key figure in this, I think Henry St. Clair of St. Clair Oil, he was also a devout Roman Catholic, and he was pardoned by Frank J. Hogan in relation to the Teapot Dome.
Well, okay, so I need to look more into this.
Well, I would say it was a completely Catholic event, George, just quickly, because even the guy who was convicted, Albert Fall, was Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole thing was just, and this was right around the time of the Mexican Revolution in the 1920s. The oil companies were trying to secure the entire oil supply of Mexico, and it was like the Catholic Church and the oil companies working hand in hand to conquer Mexico at this time in the 1920s, because there was like a liberal revolution that took place in Mexico in the 1917, which the church and the oil companies mutually tried to counteract.
Oh, okay.
They started nationalizing some of the oil fields, and they started taking the property of the church away. So it was an emergency, if you will, for big oil and the Catholic Church. And Ed Doheny is like the perfect merging of those interests, big oil and the Catholic Church. Also, the founder of Globe Oil, I think, was Ignatius Aloysius O'Shaughnessy, founder of Globe Oil out of Oklahoma. You could probably imagine with that name, he was a super Catholic, Jesuit-educated papal chamberlain, and like a Knight of Malta. That was Ignatius Aloysius O'Shaughnessy. He founded Globe Oil.
Boy, you'd have to assume that in addition to being a papal knight, he was like part leprechaun.
With a name like that, honestly, and he's not mentioned that much. I first came across him in Nino Lobello's book Vatican USA, and then I found his New York Times obituary. It kind of remained in the shadows, like all of the ultra rich papal aristocrats do. Like Frank Folsom remained in the shadows. The chairman and president of the Radio Corporation of America throughout the Second World War. I guess he joined on the latter half of the Second World War. Folsom was also like a president of Coke, Bohemian Club member, like a papal knight of the Cape and Sword, a knight of Malta, a knight of the Holy Sepulchre, knight of Saint Sylvester, educated at 3 Jesuit schools, received like the Lateran medal, all sorts of Catholic medals, and he's not brought up at all. It's predictable. How many times do you see people, George, mentioning like the Brady family, for instance, for like Catholic power in America? Like Nicholas Frederick Brady, who is the director of 50 corporations, first American to be the Supreme Order of Christ. That's a Vatican knighthood, Knight of Malta. Nicholas Frederick Brady's wife gave their entire mansion to the Jesuits, and Nicholas Frederick Brady financed an entire Jesuit novitiate out of his own pocket in Warnersville. And it still happens to this day. Like Joe Ricketts, the Jesuit-educated billionaire who founded TD Ameritrade, he just built the Jesuits a 900-acre retreat house. It might even be 9,000 acres. This thing is huge, called Cloisters on the Platte. But for some reason, the Catholic elite doesn't get brought up in the discussions on like who owns the financial wealth of America. Like it was Roman Catholic. Charles Schwab founded Bethlehem Steel. Catholic. John Francis Keeney, the founder of Monsanto. Catholic. Thomas Levy, the founder of Farmers Insurance, Jesuit trained, super Catholic, Jesuit trained at Georgetown and Santa Clara. Farmers Insurance actually offered special low insurance rates for students of Jesuit Georgetown University. And his tax-free foundation to this day, gives millions and millions to the Jesuit schools. You mentioned the founder of Starbucks went to, was it Jesuit University of Santa Clara? What was?
Gordon Gawker.
Gawker, yeah. So like all these connect, all of the evidence is right there that they're controlling, commerce. It's that the chairman of the Federal Reserve Board, Jerome Powell, went to Georgetown. Going, but just looking through the CEOs, like the CEO of General Electric, Jim Flannery, Jesuit trained at Fairfield. Chairman at Viacom, Thomas May, is a devout Catholic. He sits on the board of like the Catholic Archdiocese in Boston. That's the CEO of Viacom. When you go through the world's central banks, they're all controlled by Catholics. Like the Bank of there's like 8 Catholics on the board of directors at the Bank of International Settlements. 0 Jews and 8 Catholics. A Canadian, Mark Carney, was recently the head of Bank of Canada. He's now the head of the Bank of England. He was given like the Catholic of the Year award in England. So it's pretty foolish to say Jews are in control of finance. I have a video, like the current head of the European Central Bank, Christine Lagarde, went to see Jesuit Pope Francis twice in 2014 and 2016. She was the former head of the IMF, now head of the ECB. Didn't mean to get a little sidetracked there on the topic. The point being that they're in firm control of commerce, and that's why you see lawyers like Frank J. Hogan. They also control, and they think of like lawyers like Edward Bennett Williams, George.
Yes.
Knight of Malta, Knight of Malta, Jesuit trained. Brendan Sullivan, Jesuit trained. Plato Chatteris, Jesuit trained. If you look at Robert S. Bennett, who was Clinton's lawyer during Watergate, if you look at those 4 lawyers I just named, clients, all Jesuit trained, you see like there's a distinct pattern that emerges. And Frank Hogan ties into this too. The Jesuit trained lawyers represent the most elite of society. The biggest corporations, like the CIA, traitorous CIA agents, Like Plato Chacharis, Georgetown trained, was the lawyer for Opus Dei Robert Philip Hansen, who was selling Soviet top secret U.S. military secrets and corporate patents to the Soviets for like 25 years. And the Jesuit trained lawyer made sure that the American public never got to see what treason was committed. The point so it's key. This Frank Hogan is a big figure. And thanks for bringing him up, George, because he kind of ties into the whole Jesuit control of commerce and the legal system as well. Because the legal system is set up to keep commerce in the hands of the monopolists and cartelists.
Well, something I mentioned on our last broadcast was the wife of the current mayor of Honolulu. Current mayor of Honolulu, Hawaii, is Kurt Caldwell. His wife is Donna Tanau. She got her, as I said in the previous broadcast, she got her law degree from Georgetown, and was it? Hang on a second.
And just while you're pulling up, I got the quote here from George Elderton's book up, and just I'll finish up with this quote before I sign off here. But I probably got to take off here in about 3 to 5 minutes.
Okay, so just something I mentioned on the previous broadcast. Donna Tanau, who's the wife of Kurt Caldwell. Kurt Caldwell is currently the mayor of Honolulu, Hawaii. Donna Tanau got her law degree, I believe, from Georgetown University. And since 2002, she is the president of the Bank of Hawaii. But prior to that, she was the chairwoman of the Federal Deposit Insurance Commission, 1998 to 2001.
They used the papal key on their logo, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation or Commission.
Yes. And I actually did not know that until you pointed it out. So probably a good idea for all people to look at various agencies with which they're dealing or they're interested in, like the Federal Reserve, the U.S. Treasury Department, NSA, even more obscure ones, the Federal Trade Commission. Just simply look at their logos.
Well, absolutely, all of them. You'll see Roman symbolism in all of them, especially like the reefs, the Gregorian eagle.
Okay, so so you said you only have a few minutes, so I'd just like to spend a moment to bring up another person in my file, Anne Armstrong. Where is she? Okay. Yes, here we go. I was looking at something else, and I came across the name Anne Armstrong recently. Anne legendary Armstrong. She lived from 1927 to 2008. She was a U.S. diplomat and politician. She was the first woman to serve as counselor to the president and to the United States ambassador to the UK. She served Richard Nixon, Gerald Ford, and Jimmy Carter. She was also the recipient of the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 1987. Now, something we talked about earlier is like when you're on the front page of like Time or some other magazine, that means that Rome is acknowledging you. Another way Rome acknowledges you, if you get something like the Congressional Medal of Freedom.
Or you could. I noticed you sent me this, George. Pope John Paul II Pope John Paul II received a Congressional Gold Medal, July 17th, 2000, officially mandated by the U.S. Congress.
Now she herself received an honorary doctorate degree from St. Mary's University in San Antonio, Texas. So she served as an advisor to 4 different presidents. And
I'd say all those 4 presidents were Vatican coadjutors.
Yes.
All of them were.
So I know she may sound like an obscure figure, but it's a good idea to look into big name figures, big name events. But it's also a good idea to look into small name figures because they're the ones who are actually calling the shots and pulling the strings.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. That's the thing too. People need to look into the advisors. It's not just who's president, vice president. You got to look into who's the deputy advisor, who are the legal advisors. Like Trump's current White House advisor, Pat Cipollone, has a degree from Jesuit Fordham. Just like Trump. The White House chief of staff, Mick Mulvaney, went to Jesuit Georgetown. And nothing has changed. And the same thing, if you go back to Reagan, this is a great find here, George, with Ann Anderson. I'm saying that right?
Armstrong.
Armstrong. Okay, Armstrong. Great connection with this Armstrong. Because she's the first female to act in this a role, like a senior position like this, and predictably, she's connected to the Catholic Church. She's like the first female to be deputy CIA director. Avril Haines went to Jesuit Georgetown. Madeleine Albright, I think she was the first female Secretary of State. She's been a professor at Georgetown for over 20 years. But I think she grew up Jewish.
Well, she's actually she's an Episcopalian now, which is, as I said, the American Anglican Church. But
I'd say at this point, you could say Episcopalian is also Catholic light.
Yes. Well, as I said, in addition to teaching at Georgetown, she was like an adjunct instructor. She was also a member of the Council of Foreign Relations.
I believe she still is. Also,
okay.
Like Kissinger was a professor at Georgetown, and then think about that. That also further just George. We just again debunked the fact that the Jews control the world because they always point to the boogeymen, Kissinger and Madeleine Albright, and both of them were professors at the Jesuit Power Center in Washington D.C., Georgetown University. Which shows that they're kissing the papal ring. Like just wanted to mention that. Because I see it like there's apparently just according to some dude who comments on a lot of my stuff. He told me that a lot of like Jews, like apparently in Europe especially, just the anti-Jewish fury is like taking over. Like people like Jews are even like fleeing some parts of France because they're afraid that they're going to be persecuted. And even in America, like, there's been a bunch of Jewish temples, burnt down recently. Like the Catholic Church is prepared. I think they're gonna blame their entire all of their financial looting on the Jews. I think that's in the works right now. So I think it's important to debunk the idea that the Jews control the world. Kissinger and Madeleine Albright are great examples of that.
And of course,
serving the Jesuits at Georgetown.
And of course, we were talking about Bernie Sanders. His wife is Roman Catholic.
Well, I'm saying Bernie Sanders, the fellow senator with Bernie Sanders, is the longest-serving senator in the U.S. Senate, and that's Jesuit-trained, devout Catholic Patrick Leahy at Georgetown.
And so, surprise, surprise.
Well, I don't think I think Sanders is ultimately here to take votes. I think they're trying to split the vote between like Sanders and Warren, so Joe Biden becomes the candidate.
Yeah,
Kamala Harris is like she's a great Jesuit shill. She covered like for pedophiles as a San Francisco DA, but I don't think she's gonna win. I think and Harris is probably being used to split the vote between Biden and the rest of the candidates. I think they'll want Biden or lay Jesuit Pete Buttigieg to win.
Well, I'm just thinking they'll probably down the road they'll have Kamala Harris. Well, the Democrats do eventually get the White House back, which will probably be back in 2025. She'll probably be U.S. Attorney General.
No, she'd be great in that role. The U.S. Attorney General is also like a historically Catholic position.
Yes.
Right, U.S. Attorney General is Roman Catholic, not Jewish. William Barr.
Okay, yes. But as I said, she has a good gig as the junior senator from California, where she's serving with Papal Court Papa Jew Dianne Feinstein, who is trained by the Catholics at Sacred Heart Convent in San Francisco. But as I said, Kamala Harris um, has been a commencement speaker at the University of San Francisco before, at least once.
Oh, and a few of her staffers went to the Jesuit University of San Francisco. I think 3 or 4 of her staffers. I've seen that on like a University of San Francisco bulletin.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you for bringing that up. I can share that with people. Um, okay, so it's almost 2 p.m. Eastern. So I guess we'll have to pick this up, I guess, next week.
Yeah, we can pick it up next week. Although there was the one. Actually, I'll mention we'll go into the George Elderkin's book on the next stream. But just that I wanted to bring this up was the connection to the Jesuits and IBM and to linguistics, all kind of in one. But there's this Jesuit here, Robert Busa. I got him up on the screen. Italian Jesuit priest. I mean, we were talking about this before he went live here, but he was the author of the Index Timoticus, which was a complete lemmatization of the works of St. Thomas Aquinas. And lemmatization in linguistics is grouping, from Wikipedia, is the process of grouping together the inflected forms of a word so that they can be analyzed as a single item, identified by the word's lemma or dictionary form. So this project to remaster the St. Thomas Aquinas' books was called the Index Timoticus, and it was put together by this Jesuit Roberto Busa. But not surprisingly, well, I wasn't aware of this but it makes perfect sense. The Jesuits reached out to IBM to get this project done. And you see it right from Wikipedia. 1946, the Jesuit Roberto Busa planned the Index Timoticus as a tool for performing text searches within the massive corpus of Aquinas' works. And St. Thomas Aquinas taught it was okay to murder heretics, for instance. But in 1949, Roberto Busa, S.J., met with Thomas J. Watson, the founder of IBM. And this Thomas J. Watson was knighted by Adolf Hitler with the Order of the German Eagle. And we know Hitler actually modeled the Nazi Party off of the Jesuit order. That comes from Walter Schellenberg's book, Hitler's Secret Service. You see, so in 1949, the Jesuit Busa, Robert Busa, S.J., met with Hitler knighted Thomas J. Watson, the founder of IBM, and was able to persuade the Hitler sympathizer Thomas J. Watson to sponsor the Index Timoticus. The project lasted about 30 years and was eventually produced in the 70s in 56 printed volumes. And I know it's a really interesting connection because I was just hanging out with my friend a couple days ago, and he's in a linguistics class right now, and he's aware of the research I do with the Jesuits, and he's brought up how this Jesuit was brought up in his linguistics class. But this Robert Busa is an interesting connection from the Jesuits to IBM, and we know the Donald Wetzel, the patenter of the ATM machine, was educated by Jesuits at Jesuit High School and Jesuit Loyola University, and Donald Wetzel worked at IBM before I believe he was at IBM when he patented the ATM machine. But Donald Wetzel, I wrote this in the preface for The Dollar in the Vatican. In a 1995 interview at the Smithsonian, Wetzel said that his instructor at Jesuit Loyola got him his job at IBM. And, IBM is so it's very intriguing. So that all of this shows that the Jesuits are in control of IBM. And Thomas J. Watson's son was affiliated with Father Felix Morlian's Catholic intelligence organization, Pro Deo. I showed that in the video I did on Morlian down in my feed. And the IBM, they were openly involved in building up both the Nazis and the Soviets simultaneously, which is very Jesuitical of them. Just like the Jesuits created both Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. I have it's even admitted from CIA documentation that the Soviet Ryad computer system was a literal copy of the IBM 360 series. So they admit that this technology was acquired illegally. So papal traders in the IBM leadership or the U.S. government, were building up the Soviet computer systems all throughout the 70s with IBM tech. And there's the book IBM and the Holocaust by Edwin Black, I think, which shows that the Catholic Nazis were using IBM technology to spy on heretics in the concentration camps, which is a really interesting connection with this Jesuit to IBM here with Robert Busa. I just came across him 2 days ago.
Okay, so I actually need to be going myself.
Oh yeah, no worries at all. I should get going here too. But yeah, thanks. Yeah, well, maybe we can do another one. Actually, I'm going on like a vacation on the 22nd, so maybe we can like a little family vacation. Maybe we can do another stream before then. We'll keep in touch over email.
Okay, so the 22nd, that would be this Sunday?
Yes, this Sunday I'm heading out. Maybe we can do one Saturday or Friday.
Okay, yes, I'll keep me posted. So Friday would possibly work. Saturday would not.
Saturday, okay, yeah. Let's go for Friday then. That'll work for me.
And hopefully Johnny can join us.
Yeah, that'd be great if you could. Yeah, and I linked it in my community page. Johnny's new book, Romans of Mass Destruction, is now available for purchase. And yeah, it'd be great to have Johnny here on the next one. Hopefully he can. Hopefully he makes it.
Okay. Well,
we'll sign it off here. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and God bless. And we'll catch you on the next one. All roads lead to Rome. Take care, everyone.
Okay. Take care.
See you, George.